Okay, it is 5 minutes past the hour. We will go ahead and start. Thank you to everyone who joined us here today. Special thanks to Professor Marin for donating his valuable time to us and his deep expertise. I'm Felina Fleck. I'm the Assistant Director of the Graduate and International Programs Office, mainly recruiting and marketing for the LLM programs. And we are hosting this wonderful talk today. I encourage you all to unfreeze your cameras. That way we can see everyone that's here. We can engage a lot more with each other. We do ask you to stay muted just to not disrupt the way those Zoom calls can be disrupted, but we'd love to engage with you. And yeah, thank you all for being here. Like I said, I'm joined by Professor Marin. He teaches at USD in our LLM program, specifically our online LLM in US law program. And he has also worked for Themis Bar Review and Kaplan Bar Review, helping many students already pass state bar exams. And he was so kind to join us here today and donate some of that time and expertise to us. So thank you very much, Professor Marin, and I will hand it off to you.
Well, thank you so much and welcome everybody. It's really nice to spend some time this afternoon with you. And I hope in this about approximately an hour, you glean at least one thing about bar exam writing for the essay component. And our goal, of course, is to make sure that we are using best practices and maximizing what we need to do for writing a response on the bar exam that's going to get us that passing score. And so the first thing that we always like to start out with, and this may seem like the easiest thing, but it always shocks me when students, and I should say alumni, graduates as well too, some of you I know are prospective students, and so you'll be looking at this maybe in a few years, but be proactive. Read the directions. And so I talk with many students sometimes, or at this juncture saying, well, I kind of know what's going to show up on the bar exam. The first place I would be going to, whatever jurisdiction you're going to be sitting for your bar examination, and I'm making the assumption, of course, most of you, if not all of you, are looking toward California's bar examination, go to the website. Of course, you're going to have to go there for the application process, but you can glean quite a bit of good information about what is the makeup. For example, right here, this is just a screenshot of what the California Bar Examiners post on its website, talking about 3 essay questions, answer these in the morning, then you're going to have, and I get to a slide on this in a moment, 2 in the afternoon, a performance test as well too. But then they already tell you 1 hour approximately for each one of the essays. Also tells you here what they expect a passing score to be, how you should write in a format to maximize your points as well too. And of course, we're going to get to this in a moment. I'm not going to read this for you, but it would be in your best interest, as I was alluding to, make sure you figure out what the bar examiners want. What are their minimum standards they're looking for? And so with that said, I want to talk a little bit here about some of the steps that you should be following when writing an essay response for a bar exam. And I say follow these steps, but keep in mind, when you get to your full bar prep course that you will be using, you could hear this from some of your other professors, your faculty members as well too, different ways to break this down. So don't think, right, that this is the only way to do it. I'm going to highlight the things that you should do in a certain order, but I just warn you that I may have broken it down in a few places into subparts. You may want to think about merging some of these as you get faster, you build up your stamina doing the practice for sitting for the bar. And so here are the main 6 steps, if you will, I would say that you should be thinking about when you're going to go through and try to attack one of these essay questions. And of course, all the essay components on your bar examination. But always really good to determine the time allotted for the question. And as we already saw for purposes of California, upfront tell you this question should be done approximately within an hour's amount of time. Second, hopefully you've been told this before, maybe depending on where you've gone, even if you haven't done full LLM program law school before. But one of the things you want to go to is figure out what the person testing you wants you to write about. Read what we call the call of the question. Sometimes they're called the interrogatories as well too. Go to that place because now the bar examiners are saying, and we can glean some great information, this is where you're going to get your points for these type of questions. After you read the call of the question, let's go back up to the top of the fact pattern and read methodically through the facts that the bar examiners have given us for the essay question. And that brings us all the way down to the bottom then. And this is where I kind of told you, maybe I broke this down a little bit where you can, excuse me, merge some of these together. But irrespective, when you get down to the bottom, you're probably going to be rereading that call of the question. Remember, so important to ascertain what you can get points on for the essay question, maybe something that is not going to receive points. And you don't want to waste any time in that precious hour for each essay that you're given. Create a checklist. You may have heard this as well too, called outlining. Outline your answer. Come up with a roadmap. And I'm going to walk you through how you could do that for purposes of, again, when we used to say paper and pencil, but as you know, we're going to online. I would tell you when you're taking an online test that you're going to be looking toward here, the best thing to do is create your checklist, your roadmap right within that exam software. You're already going to have your headers and your subheaders, and we're going to get to that and talk about that a little bit more. And then finally, who's heard of this mnemonic, this acronym IRAC before? Yeah, right. Most law students, law professors, anyone who maybe even knows a lawyer as well too has heard of this idea of IRAC. This is the format that usually is used that we present to law students and again bar takers to say this is the format you can write in to successfully write an answer response that's going to get a passing score, recoup those points that you want. Now I'm going to get to this. You may have heard it called different things. Sometimes maybe even in your classes, CRAC, right? Conclusion first, PRAC, topic sentence as well. There's different ways and subparts and time pending. I hope we have a little bit of time to talk about this idea that you may not have heard it posed this way before. But IRAC is really a fluid concept, if you will. There's different ways to structure. And depending on the legal analysis that you're being tested on, maybe a formation of a contract, maybe you have to talk about some crimes, maybe you have to go through and talk about whether certain pieces of evidence will be admitted or not into evidence, there could be different structures that will help you. And so I will mention this again, but one of the best things, going back to kind of that slide I was alluding to in regard to reading directions, same thing I'll say when it comes to being proactive, when it comes to figuring out and already predicting what would the IRAC look like? What would my roadmap look like if I get tested on such a type of topic? So let's jump right into it. And my goal through our presentation here and hopefully leaving enough time for some questions is that I want to walk you through those steps and then start talking about what would this look like. So I'm going to do some narration through using an essay question so you can start visualizing this as well too. Here are the steps, of course, on paper, or again, on the slides that I have, but what would this look like? What am I thinking and processing when I get a question? The first thing we already talked about, right? Figure out ascertain the amount of time. And as I already showed you one screenshot, here's a few others as well for you right here from the State Bar of California. Right on its website, when you go to the breakdown of the bar, it tells you here's day one in column number 1 on the left, then day 2, here's the multiple choice sessions. At some point, right, maybe somebody else will talk to you. Maybe if the faculty here wants me back at some point, love talking about multiple choice skills as well too, and the process of that. But again, very important, as you can see, a huge part of the bar examination as well too, that you have to be able to tackle that. But we'll leave day 2 on the side for now. We're really here today to talk about day number 1. And as I already alluded to right here, and I gave you that California bar tells you 1 hour per essay, total of 3 hours in the morning of day 1 for essays 1, 2, 3. You receive a lunch break, and then after lunch, you go into 2 more essays and then a performance test. So you can see a little bit longer in the afternoon because you have both essays 4 and 5, an hour allotted to each, but then an hour and a half for the performance test. Again, different skills for performance tests as well too, to make sure, and again, don't discount the importance, right, of needing to attack those as well too. But maybe that's again for another day as well. Just a little bit more information here, and I had already told the staff here and the faculty that I'm more than happy. I'm going to send these PowerPoint slides to them, and so if you want to reach out to any of them, I put this in here specifically so you have some annotations of where you could go back to, especially if you will be sitting for the California bar exam. Here's a link where I got a lot of this information. And obviously, right now, if your perspective coming into our LLM program, I would not go off of these slides. You can save them at this point, but this will undoubtedly be updated, right? So you're always going to want to go where the most current information is. But at least right here, you can do a quick Google search, but I also put in the website link as well too. Just a little bit more of the breakdown, going back to the test makers telling us what we should be thinking about when crafting a response that is going to be minimally a pass, right, for our purposes. And so my call of the question comes next, as we alluded to. And this is really fascinating. Some of you have already maybe gotten into your bar studies, maybe through the LLM program. Some of the faculty have given you different bar style essay questions as well too. Maybe you've even taken it upon yourself and already gone, because by the way, on state bar websites, they give you usually a release of prior questions as well too. California does that for many administrations. You can go back through, look at the old questions that were given on prior bar administrations, and then see selected answer points as well too. But one of the things, if you look through this, you see different types of calls of the questions when it comes to the way the bar examiners put together these essay questions. Some of them are very specific calls of the question, almost tell you specifically where we get that word from. This is exactly the one thing we want you to write about. Others are more broad. Some of you have seen this, and I'm going to give you some examples in a moment, but really just discuss and decide all of the issues that you see, kind of akin to client walks into your office and kind of unloads on you and tells you, this is everything that happened. And then you have to identify and you have to issue spot what are the things that we need to talk about in the scope of this essay question. Of course, we can have mixed of specific and broad as well too. And finally, the bar examiners, especially in California, have gone through and sometimes like to test with multiple subparts. So here's a few examples right here. And by the way, this is not all of the facts from this old fact pattern. I just took a little bit of a snippet of it because really we're focusing at this juncture at the call of the question. Look at this one. What products liability claims may Paul bring against Dishway? Discuss. So that's a little bit more broad. And again, at the same time, maybe it's a mixture in your mind as well, too, of going, that's kind of specific as well, too. It's telling me that for this question, to recoup the points needed to pass this question, need to talk about products liability claim. And right away, as we talked about, this is the whole point of why we start with the call of the question. I already know this is a torts question. By the way, though, the only reason I say this could be also seen as broad, right, is that many of you who have taken torts class also know that there are contractual theories for recovery under products liability claims as well, too. So that's going to then take us going back into the facts, which we will in a moment, and go line by line to really issue spot everything we could be talking about. Look at this, how pointed. With what crimes, right? And already I like this parenthetical S, because isn't that a nice hint the bar examiners are giving us that there's probably maybe more than one? So issue spotting be key again, could be reasonably charged with. So that's pretty broad. It just said crimes in general. I now know this is a criminal law question, but it wasn't as specific as saying products liability for our tort claims, was it? And so you can also see here, there was parts 1, 2, 3. Look at this one. 3, under the Fourth Amendment to the United States Constitution. So we have some constitutional criminal procedure as well. So already I've now gone, this is not only writing about maybe the crimes or the defenses to the crimes, I'm going to have to dredge up my knowledge of criminal procedure as well, too, in the constitutional arena, but at least maybe a little bit more pointed because it told me which amendment we're thinking about. So I'm already thinking and brainstorming, maybe there's issues with search and seizure going on, for an example. Look at this one right here. What ethical violations, if any, has Allison committed with respect to? And then this gives me a sub-tabulated part, as I was alluding to as well. So it didn't really tell us in this case, as some of them, was there a violation of this specific ABA or California ethical conduct rules? But it told us, well, certain things are going to happen in the fact pattern. You need to then figure out the trigger of what rule or rules are we triggering. And by the way, the last thing I do want to point out to you, which I did say in passing, look at the last line. It says, answer according to California and ABA authorities. So in many cases, bar administrations will tell you these are the rules that you have to be looking toward as well, too. So very important, all the things we can glean from the call of the question of these different bar questions. It's the main part that's going to help put us on that path for success for then actually crafting the answer response. And so practice, as I have here, of course, is always going to be key, right? Practice will help. And so I brought this just very short question that I had put together. And so it's only testing one issue here. Remember, as you already saw with these bar essays, there's going to be subparts, and there's a lot more than just this that the bar examiners expect you to write within an hour. So think about this if this were just one of the many issues that you had to get through in your hour for the respective essay. But let's go through, and I promised you, I want to go through with our 6 steps. We've already gone through steps 1 and 2, basically. Figure out the time, read the call of the question right here, and then we're going to springboard, jump into the other parts as well, too. So this is a pretty specific call of the question, isn't it? Does worker have a viable false imprisonment claim against supervisor? So I already know what we sometimes like to call the key players or the stars, right? We know, and many of you who've done this before and done some practice essays, the bar examiners may not just put 2 players in a fact pattern. They could put 3, 4, 5, 6. And so the more people going on, sometimes we lose sight, right, again, of who are we dealing with. You have to keep organized. So right away with reading this column, the question, I know, and the fact that it says false imprisonment right here, worker supervisor, I'm already going for purposes that I'm thinking we have a tort cause of action, and I know my plaintiff, and I know my defendant. And already cross-referencing with what I told you before, you can easily start typing into the exam software different headers or subheaders to help you with the organization, to make it that much faster for you when you're processing this in that hour. And so I give you the three main elements of a false imprisonment claim. By the way, depending on your jurisdiction, right, there's sometimes additional elements that are added, right? I'm not here for purposes. I do teach torts class, and one of the first things that I will say is I'll go, yes, there's these three elements, but even in the few cases that we cover, I could name up to two more. Sometimes some of them are combined. For our purposes now, for this essay question, go off of these elements I'm giving you, but with the caveat, when you get to bar studying, where some of you are even at that point right now, go with your commercial bar prep review or the specifics for the breakdown that you're being given, right? But there's three main elements to an intentional tort false imprisonment claim that the plaintiff has to prove, this prima facie cause of action. Plaintiff must prove these three elements to move forward with the litigation. Intent, in the mind of the defendant, did they intend to confine that plaintiff? And then did they actually cause confinement of the plaintiff in a bounded area, no reasonable means of escape? And then finally, if the plaintiff was confined, was the plaintiff aware at that time of the confinement? Or alternatively, were they harmed by the confinement? By the way, some of you have already heard this, and you may know this because, again, many of you, I know this as well, are licensed in other jurisdictions or countries. The two most important words, at least that we have on here, ands and ors. Do you need them all, and, or are they alternatives? Or do I just need one? I don't need both of them. So very important, and I would digress for one moment. That doesn't go with just the specific bar essay writing that we're here to talk about today. But as you're going through your studies, and especially your bar studies as well too, keep that organized, right? And figure out what are the ands and what are the ors. But here are three main elements we're going to go through. And by the way, for those of you maybe who have not heard that before, when we talk about elements in law, one of the things that lawyers do is that we break big rules down into small pieces. We don't try to digest it all at once. And so we basically chop it, if you will, into the separate, distinct ideas. And when we say the word element, element means you need every single one of them. There's your ands, right? So to be successful for a false imprisonment claim, it's not enough for me just to have two out of the three or one out of the three. I need to prove all the elements if I am the plaintiff. And so just make sure you understand that moving forward when I use that terminology. The fact that I'm calling these three things elements is we're going to, in our essay question, have to prove all three of them. Write and say, here's why all three are met, bar greater. And if not, then the plaintiff won't have a successful or a viable false imprisonment claim. Okay, just wanted to make sure for those of you who hadn't heard that terminology yet. So now we move on and we're going to look at the facts in the fact pattern. Go line by line. Why do I have this word up here, trigger? One of the things you need to get in the habit, or you're already doing this and you need to keep perfecting this, is that as you go through a bar exam essay question, there is a certain reason the bar examiners wrote those facts into the fact pattern. And it's very rare for purposes of a bar essay of again with the crafting of it, that they're going to put a bunch of irrelevant facts, just make you read a bunch of things that don't make sense. Now, as we're going to see, you have to kind of lay the foundation in the scene, if you will, right? There's a purpose of, I can't just jump right into the end of the story. And so some of it at the beginning may be a little bit more of, let's introduce the people that are around in this fact pattern that you're going to be meeting, right, and have to talk about. But for the most part, every line of text is triggering something. It's triggering a legal concept. And so one of the things that I would ask of you to really be thinking about, okay, and sometimes this is the interesting part. You have to work up to being able to do these, of course, within an hour, not just the issue spotting, but also writing that response that we want to. But sometimes slower is better at first, especially when you're trying to learn how to attack these. I usually tell applicants, when you get to a piece of punctuation, whether it's a period, a colon, a semicolon, an exclamation point, a question mark, stop and ask yourself, did I learn anything? Did that sentence trigger anything that I may have to write about? Well, let's go through, and I want to go through this process line by line here. Worker was excited because it was her first day working at grocery store. Stop at the punctuation. I look at this one and kind of like I told you, most fact patterns, when the bar examiners in all jurisdictions are putting this together, they still have to tell the story of what's going on between the people, the entities, the parties. How did we get here? And so I look at that and that helps me because it's kind of telling me, again, a little bit about, I recognize, okay, worker's going to be the plaintiff in this case because the call of the question told me that. But I don't know if I see anything legally relevant triggering at this point. This can be helpful as well, too, because as you go through, right, most jurisdictions for purposes, you have the ability within the exam software to highlight, annotate the fact pattern as well, too. So you could start striking or saying, this is something I don't need to go back to, because remember, organization, and when you are reading this at light speed under time conditions, you don't have the luxury to keep going back and rereading 10, 15, 20 times. You're going to then potentially look at losing or running out of time at the end. And we definitely do not want that to happen. That's the last thing we want to occur. And so think about that as well, too, how important and how that can help you as well as you're navigating to sift the facts, if you will, to really help you when you get ready to then start IRACing these facts into the essay. She had been hired to work in the warehouse, stocking shelves and placing refrigerated items in the coolers. And so I stopped there at the period again. Again, this is very nice, isn't it? It's lining up what this new job of worker is, but I don't see anything legally relevant to triggering either that we have a defendant with the intent to confine her yet. I don't see her being actually confined. And again, if she's not actually confined, she's not aware of confinement or harmed of them. So nothing in my three elements have really been triggered yet. We just have more narration, more of the story. And so worker arrived on time and reported to her supervisor. Again, nothing triggering with those three elements of false imprisonment, but now I see supervisor, who was in the call of the question, working into this fact pattern. Supervisor told worker to grab a crate of pineapples and follow him into the fruit cooler. Again, I don't think pineapples are legally relevant at all to our three elements of false imprisonment. Not that I can see yet, but the only thing I may be seeing is where we're leading up to, at least. We're going to a certain area of this store in a fruit cooler, but I still don't see facts legally relevant per se to our three elements. Supervisor opened the big door and ushered worker inside. Well, now we're getting somewhere, aren't we? I'm starting to see in these facts, if supervisor is doing this willfully, ushering the worker in, that's facts that are potentially now going toward, did he have the intent ultimately to confine her in that area? In this, now we know, a big door leading to the fruit cooler. So I definitely want to star those facts. I think they're going to be important and something we're going to be typing at least for one or more of our elements of our essay response. Thinking it would be funny to lock worker inside, supervisor slammed the door and bolted it shut. Well, those are really good facts, aren't they? Helping me to show if we're bolting a door, slamming it shut, that looks like it was a willful, purposeful act that he's doing. In addition, I think we're going to see this in the next sentence as well too. And by the way, there's sometimes more legally relevant facts to more than one element. Slamming the door and bolting it shut is helping to show that now that this plaintiff, this worker, was confined in an area. Worker dropped the crate of pineapples, turned around, and began banging on the door. Well, that's kind of helping me to think about what? You may recall, right, that I told you the third element, one of the ways you can prove it is if your plaintiff is aware of being confined in the bounded area. Well, if you begin banging on the door, I think that person is alert. They're awake. They know about it. They're conscious of it. We have other facts here as well too. Worker yelled, "Please let me out. I'm claustrophobic. I don't like it in here," as she pounded and kicked on the cooler door. I will tell you, in many cases, this goes both for multiple choice and also essay, and then of course for purposes MPT or performance test as well too. When bar examiners give you quoted language, a lot of the time that will end up somewhere within your essay response. They're giving you verbatim language about what somebody said, what they were thinking, what they were doing. And so anytime I get to quoted language, I usually circle it, or I have students or I have bar examinees say, okay, I really need to pay attention and make sure I don't leave some of those facts out, because I'm going to get to this in a minute. But remember, the bar examiners have already pre-scripted out. They know what they want to see in these different responses, and they've already said, we put these facts into the fact pattern for a specific reason. We expect to see them repeated and applied to the rules of law somewhere in here. So very important. That's one other tip. Look for quoted verbatim language in an essay fact pattern as well too. Well, after a few minutes, supervisor opened the door and said, "Get a hold of yourself. It was just a joke. Isn't that hilarious?" And so we get a little bit more saying that now the door is open, helping us maybe to say that, yeah, it was locked before. She had no way out. There are our facts. And now, one last time, revisit that call of the question and just do a quick check, right? Especially if it is one of those multiple subpart call of the questions that we looked at a few examples of or another. Do not leave any points on the table. Make sure, right, that you do one more check to say, do I have my roadmap in order for our purposes here of now getting ready to get an outline of this done in the exam software and then hit the ground running with writing our answer response. And so that's the perfect dovetail into this idea of let me make my checklist. What is my roadmap? And as you can see right here, I gave you the three elements again of breaking down a false imprisonment claim that the plaintiff needs to prove. And I'm giving you a little bit more law as well too. And so this is one thing, of course, you're going to get during your time in the LLM program, in your classes, when you take your respective class doctrinal course that will go through and then prepare you for those ones that are tested on the bar exam. You'll see this in your bar prep as well too. The bar prep or both will give you and say, here are certain words. Here are certain words that the law defines these elements as. And very important in many cases that for full points, the bar examiners do want to see some of this verbiage, right? I keep saying this, but if you open any bar prep materials, Barbary, Kaplan, Themis, many more out there as well too, they'll say confinement is generally defined as a bounded area with no reasonable means of escape. And so you have to also remember, and this can be helpful as well too, you're already getting, if you will, your I's and R's of IRAC down, right? You're already getting that into your roadmap. And the last little blip you need to do before, and by the way, as I said, this may be very helpful for some of you already doing this into the exam software, if that's the way that you're building this. Some of you will say, you know what, I've already gone through, I've highlighted or I've marked up the fact pattern. I know where to look back for the legally relevant facts. So you may not end up doing this, right? And you're not going to be writing kind of like a T-chart that I have here. You don't have that ability, but just for you to be thinking about as well too, because it's so important, as I mentioned, that in our A and IRAC, we're getting those legally relevant facts down into our response that the bar examiners expect to see when you do your application, your analysis of each one of these elements or different thoughts as well too. And so for intent to combine, like we mentioned from the fact pattern we just went over, said supervisor ushered the worker inside the freezer, thought it would be funny to lock her inside. So good facts showing, did the defendant, our supervisor, want to, did he purposefully want to confine her, want to lock her in or not? So those are facts we're going to be thinking that are going to end up in. We also said that we extracted from the fact pattern really good facts for confinement. Supervisor slammed and bolted the cooler door shut when our worker was inside. Our plaintiff, she was in there. And so good facts that will help us as well too, to apply to this definition of a bounded area with no reasonable means of escape. And then finally, we had some other good facts, didn't we? And as I told you, that quoted language, please let me out, I'm claustrophobic, I don't like it in here, as she pounded and kicked on the cooler door, really showing whether or not she was conscious or not conscious at the time of being locked in this bounded area. There's no reasonable means for her to escape. And so our planning phase, very important. And as I will say again, even though I just mentioned it, some of you will start doing this partially in your head. Others of you will be jotting this all down in the exam software. I will tell you, it doesn't matter which way you do it as long as it is successful for you. And so that's one thing you really want to start doing and practicing as you do these, right? Open up a blank Word document and remember to practice the way that you're going to have to do this on the bar exam as well, too. And finally, that leads us to my sixth step that we started with, where I think almost all of you, at least that I saw with cameras on, said, yes, we've heard about the IRAC method before. And so again, there's different hybrids of this, but for the most part, you hear it taught and presented for purposes is you're going to start by telling your grader, this is the issue or the sub issue or a sub issue that I know I have to write about because you either told me in the call of the question I have to, or it's something that I issue spotted that I know under one of those more broad calls of the question, I have to talk about it. Obviously, the R in IRAC is rule. We have to get the law down, right? That's why we call it law school. It's the study of law. That's what you're doing. We need to make sure that we're educating the bar grader and saying, I'm showing you I know the law for purposes that you wanted triggered in this essay response. This third part, the A, you sometimes hear this called analysis. You sometimes hear it called application. Sometimes they're used interchangeably. For the most part, usually you hear legal analysis, right, is writing in the IRAC format. Application is the A, right? Because we may have multiple applications of facts to many different rules as well, too. But as I have here for you, application is you applying the legally relevant facts to the rule. And so what you're going to be doing, and we're going to see in a moment, is you're identifying those legally relevant facts that we did in that outline on the preceding slide. We need to tie those back and tell the bar examiners, we understand why this set of facts you gave me meets the legal standard and it's a yes for the plaintiff, or we say, no, it doesn't meet the legal standard, it's a no. So, not so good, at least in this essay question that we pose for you, plaintiff. We may be missing one or more of the necessary element components to be successful with your false imprisonment claim. And then finally, the conclusion. Come to a logical conclusion based on the facts of, do we have a viable claim? As we saw before in some of those other essay questions that the bar examiners have given in the past, right? Is there a violation of any ethical codes? Is there a crime or a crimes? Is there a Fourth Amendment violation, etc., right? You're going to then conclude and say, based on my application of the facts to the rule, here is the outcome. Let's go through and talk about IRAC a little bit more, and then we are going to craft this essay response in the remaining time. As I started with, you may or may not have ever heard this before, but I like to use this terminology that IRAC is fluid for a few reasons. Sometimes when I talk with students, I see that they say, when I have to IRAC an essay, I have an issue, I have a rule, I have an application of the facts, and then I conclude in that essay question. In an hour-long essay, as we're looking at, there's never going to be only one IRAC. There's multiple issues that they want you writing about. So you're never just going to see an IRAC. And so don't think, and I think that's one of the things as you're kind of contemplating this, whether you're thinking about coming into the LLM program or you're at that point where you're now really ramping up, you're gearing up to really get ready to sit for the bar exam, right? I don't like to think about it as a singular. Think that you're going to be going through multiple IRACs for each of these questions. And look at what I have right here. Sometimes it could be just as easy, even though I said it's never going to be just one, but maybe one of the issues that the bar examiners test you on, it is just an IRAC. Will this piece of evidence be admitted? And you go to one rule, it's a one standalone rule that doesn't get chopped up. You apply the facts to it and you conclude. You could see that. But sometimes you could see, look at this, an IRAC. Why would I put that down with two A's? Maybe there's one rule definition you have to analyze and apply the facts to, but maybe you have what I have here, two A's, because you have two-sided arguments. The facts warrant that maybe you have to talk about, this is why it's a yes, this is why it's a no. Sometimes the bar examiners will do that. Sometimes they don't do it all one-sided, where it's always just going to be yes, 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 or no, 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 no. It's not always one-sided. So consider that. Look at this. Sometimes we have more than one rule. We could even bring it to an IRRRAAAC as well, too. Flesh that out as well too, but maybe under a certain concept the bar examiners have me writing about, there's two rule definitions I have to go through, and then I have to apply the facts to both of them before I can conclude. What about this one? IRR and only one A in C. There are some legal concepts out there where there's two rules that sometimes get compared and contrast, and then your analysis is saying the facts warrant it being this rule versus not that rule instead. Look at this, IRAC. Maybe there's multiple rules and you have to apply facts to the rule before you get to the next rule. And then finally, I have right here, you may have a series of mini IRACs, we can call them, to get through a question as well. Here's the thing. There is no ever one size fits all, but as I told you before, and I hope you can appreciate this, when there are more rules to discuss, and you put every single rule down at the beginning, you may not maximize your points applying the facts to every single rule. Remember, you all will be processing so quickly, you may lose sight and forget to analyze one or more rules. And so Nothing's wrong. And again, I would say the more important part is you practice, as I alluded to before, in the structure that you could see you being tested in. One of the things that I've tended to see over the years, though, is that if you present a rule, you analyze it, present another rule, analyze it, present another rule, analyze it, you're probably getting closer to maximizing your points under timed conditions. There's my caveat, right? Under time conditions. So many different ways to do this, right? And I still do see some students and some applicants say, I just want to get all of my rules down first, right? Memory's a hard thing for me. I want to get that out of my head so I don't forget it. That's okay, but just be forewarned, as I alluded to before, lawyers chop things into pieces. We don't say, here's every single rule out there under the law, and let me try to analyze it all at once. And so just be forewarned, right? If you're doing that, you have to be very careful then that you're going through and you're applying the facts fully as the bar examiners want to each one of those rules that you put down, okay? Just a few tips and thoughts about IRAC being fluid. So let's go ahead, I think, and I hope we have enough time here to get through this essay response, right? And writing it in our IRAC format. I've color coded this. Some of you will, this will help you. And I would say as well, too, if you've even started writing IRAC essays and you go, I just don't realize myself, right? I look at this and I don't get why I'm missing points or what do I need to do to improve. One of the best techniques I've used in the past is have students, applicants of the bar exam go back and say, color code each one of these parts. And the interesting part is sometimes you'll go, wow, I have a lot of blue and red in there. There's no black or green, which means you're missing the rule components or the application part. Or maybe you have blue, black and red in it, but no green, right? I hope you get my drift with this. It can be very helpful for you that you can go back when you're self-assessing your work and saying, where am I missing this, right? So you can start figuring out, especially when you're doing this under time conditions, what is the thing or the things I usually leave out? So it's right at the forefront of your mind when you're getting ready to write these bar essay questions. And so one of the things I wanted to give you in these slides is that there's many different transition words, if you will, that you can use to kind of prompt this. I will say the same thing because I hear this all the time where students sometimes will come back to me and say, I used all these words. I said the issue is whether or whether we have, but I didn't get points, right? When I submitted maybe a practice essay to my bar company for hypothetical grading. Don't forget, it's not just about using these words. These words are here to help propel you, if you will, to then put down the important information. And so at the end of the day, right, if you just think putting these words down are going to get you all the points, that's not the truth, right? It's really the vehicle that could help you, right? And I give you different examples. And so let's go right into this. Look at what I did here. A first main issue statement for our essay question. I decided to use this word whether. I could have said the issue is whether worker has a successful false imprisonment claim against supervisor. Good issue statements, right, for purposes of laying out for bar exams are usually going to be, let me tell you, the players and the cause of action or the legal concept that we're covering. Depending on your jurisdiction as well, too, there are some states out there that really don't afford many points to issue statements. And so you have to check that as well, too. Some of them just say it's perfectly fine putting a header down if I had said false imprisonment, worker versus supervisor. There's different ways to do it, and that's one of the things you kind of have to do state by state, and you can start ascertaining that by A, your bar prep company will help you do that, B, one of the things that you can do is many states out there, you can look at some of either the best applicant answers of past administrations or C, sample answer points for purposes of that jurisdiction and kind of start seeing, do they put headers in? How do they structure it? What were the best passing scores as well too given in a structure? I'll tell you a not so subtle hint, right? Lawyers love to stay organized, and we use headers and subheaders, and that's done for a reason. It helps lay things out and make it more organized and more helpful as we walk through step by step. And so in many cases, that can be one of your best friends to use headers as well too, to A, keep yourself organized under this time pressure scenario, also for purposes of a better answer response and order, okay? My rule, many times, as I just mentioned, that we're going over, there's an element that we have to analyze, and then there's a legal definition that the bar examiners want us to put in. Another way is maybe this means that, and there's a definition of a legal concept we have to put down, a claim of, and then we could say maybe negligence or a breach of contract claim, okay, or adverse possession for purposes of a real property question. Maybe we use this format as well too, but getting those vehicles to help you with these transition words into what the rule or rules are going to be. And so look at right away, what did I put down for free points? My big R, if you will, is the rule for false imprisonment. I've now told the bar examiner, the bar grader, when they're reading my response, they're going check, 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 full points. Look at this. I have false imprisonment. What it requires, plaintiff has to make a showing of these three elements that we talked about before. So right away, I got my free points, if you will. And so far, they're smiling, right? Always picture you want your bar grader smiling, right? Especially, again, you don't want to be one of those where they go, oh, I'm just looking everywhere for the information, right? You want to be the one where you come along and they go, wow, this is making me really happy to read. As I mentioned, there could be different ways to do this next. We could go through, right, and you could launch into a here, let me tell you about all of this, but I would say to you as well, many times, right, staying organized, I want to maximize my points, and so I'm going to use mini IRACs for each one of these elements, okay? No harm. Again, many of you have read case opinions, right? And case law. And I usually ask this in all my classes, do you like the cases a long time from, again, the 1900s, the 1800s that are just masses of paragraphs? There's no spaces in between. How terrible to read, right? Well, think the same thing for your bar response. Use white space as well, too. Don't be afraid to do that as well, because it's going to make it, again, visually a lot easier for your grader as well, too, to figure out, did you talk about everything? And look at, already, my grader is happy so far. I've told them I need to talk about the first element being the intent to confine. Different ways to do that. You may end up doing the first element, or the next issue is whether we have intent to confine. There's different wording you can use, but I will also tell you this. Again, depending on your jurisdiction, there may be those nuances you want to think about, but this is under timed conditions. And so if you are going to be more wordy just for the sake of it, let's not do that for the time aspect, because if you're writing down things that aren't going to get points, that's not worth it, okay? As long as you've made clear what I need to talk about. It means defendant has purpose or knowing with substantial certainty confinement will occur. Not going to get into all the law, especially on the second definition of what intent is for an intentional tort. But remember, throughout your bar prep, you're going to be dredging back up these rules, right, that you learned in classes. And again, for those of you entering the LLM program, you're going to learn these in the classes that you take as well, too. That's where we get the black part within here, the law. Where do we go next? Application. As we mentioned, we apply the facts that are legally relevant to the concepts. And so many times a good transition word you see is here. because that's telling the bar grader, you're now going to talk about the facts that were in the fact pattern. Or another very common way this is done is you can say the legal concept we're looking for, there is purpose in this case because. That's another great transition word, the use of because as well too. Maybe a two-sided argument. The plaintiff will argue this versus the defendant will argue that, and then we fill in the facts. One of the things, and I already see for purposes, I'm about out of time, and do we have to cut off exactly right at time? Is that important?
No, go ahead, keep
Okay,
going.
I just want to make sure, right? And I understand if we lose some of you, I think this is being recorded. And of course, you can always track down my slides if you have to get going. So don't feel that we're keeping you here. This is perfect time. I'm not falsely imprisoning you here in the rest of this lecture. But for purposes, it's been very nice. And I'm glad that for those of you who have to leave, you were able to buzz in today. But I'm glad there's a little extra time if I can get through the rest here, okay? Reasoning. You're reasoning the facts. That's what application is. You're applying the facts and telling the bar grader, this is why these facts fit the rule definition or they don't. And I already said on the prior slide, one of the very effective ways of doing this is you can use the word because. You can tie back and say, we have this legal concept because of these relevant facts that we recognize in the fact pattern. There are many other ways to reason and to apply facts to law that you most likely learned and you will learn in your legal writing courses, your introduction to law courses as well too. And you'll have reviews of this even for bar prep because all bar preps do skills parts on structure like this for essays and of course multiple choice in performance tests. But as I have in this third bullet point, there's many different ways. And by the way, we could spend a full 5 hours talking about legal reasoning, right? And hence why you get taught this in many different classes. You can reason by uses a synonym, cause and effect, antonyms, show how these facts are different than what the definition is. Or what we also called analogy and distinction. Analogize and say, these facts are similar to this, therefore it's going to come out that way. Versus distinguishing means show how the facts are different from a legal standard and it should come out the other way. So you're going to run across this, and as I mentioned before, in many cases, depending on what the topic is, if it's a torts essay or an ethics essay or a criminal essay or an evidence essay, you may find that there is a very quick, if you will, and straightforward way to reason through the facts and apply them in a way that will get you full points. But maybe it doesn't work as well for one of the other bar exam topics, right? That all goes back into what I told you before. Plan ahead. Don't get to the exam and say, well, I hope I can apply the facts, right? No, you've already thought about this and you've preempted it and figured out what are my best ways to not just analogize, but also apply facts to, again, these legal concepts. And so look at what I have right here. In the green, you need to get down the facts, right, that are legally relevant and then tie them back. And what I did here is I said we have supervisor worker inside the freezer, thought it would be funny to lock her inside, and showing purpose because there was a willful act to restrain the worker inside the cooler. And so a very easy way to say, I've shown the grader now, my reader, that these facts are legally relevant to intent to confine, and this is why they fit this definition. In many cases, and especially when you're starting out trying to write these essays, this is the part that's usually missing. This is the part that's usually missing. And so ask yourself, are you what you sometimes maybe hear just being conclusory? Are you saying, yes, this is happening, therefore there's purpose? Make sure, this is so important, as I was harping on before, you are getting the facts that the bar graders want to see in the fact pattern back into your response and tying them back to that legal standard, that legal definition. And then finally, you can conclude. Other words that could help you do this, therefore, thus, So as a result, many different ways as well too, to say probably had intent to confine the worker. And so as you can see here, I hope visually, right? And for the rest of these, I'll go a little quicker through, but we're going to do the same thing. And so practice, as we said, key. This may feel very foreign at the beginning to you. Most students come in not only to law school, but even still studying for the bar, right? This idea of you go, it does not feel natural, right? But it's like anything. And so I'll say this probably at the end again, but the more you practice, the more it will start feeling natural and you can start working up the stamina to do these faster. So let's go through these ones. Element number 2 is confinement, and we give our definition: bounded area, no reasonable means of escape. That's where the plaintiff was put in by the defendant's conduct. Well, we had our legally relevant facts that our supervisor, our defendant, slammed and bolted the cooler door shut when worker was inside. Restrained in a restricted area, there's no way out. I tied the facts back to show, right, that's why our plaintiff was in a bounded area, so worker was confined. Another little mini IRAC to go through. And finally, home stretch right here. Were we aware or were we harmed? Well, I give the definition: were we conscious of the confinement? Did we suffer physical impairment? This one's interesting, right? Because we did have facts, you should recall, that quoted language that we extracted and we wanted to put in. We knew it was legally relevant, that she was pounding, kicking on the door. That shows she knew about being locked in the freezer. Look at what I finally put here as well. In cases where there's ors, remember I told you that all important and or, right? You want to make sure you also tell the bar grader, you understand we don't need both awareness and also being harmed, though that could happen on a different fact pattern. But very quickly into my almost conclusion, look at what I wove in. The facts don't state she was harmed, only awareness is needed. There's awareness, our third element is met. So always remember those ands and ors as well too. And finally, now that we've gone through all three elements, we can do a very quick conclusion and tell the bar grader, as noted above, right? All of our elements are here, viable false imprisonment claim against the supervisor. And so here's what would be our response again, for purposes, all very nice, organized for our grader to be reading, smiling at this point. And again, the only other thing I would be adding, which I didn't put here since we didn't have multiple subparts, but at the top, I would put a header that says probably worker versus supervisor, false imprisonment, to make it very clear as almost a header break that now they know where they're going and what we're talking about next. So there we go. Those are our steps. And so in here, I put my information, email address. I also put my phone number in here, right? I'm more than happy. Love talking to prospective students. Love talking to bar takers as well too, right? So if you have any questions of anything that I went over, and especially after looking at the slides when they're released, don't hesitate. I promise you it will not be a burden, and I'm more than happy to answer those questions. But best of luck to all of you, those of you who are sitting for the bar exam soon. And again, those of you who are potentially embarking on your continuation of a LLM law school journey. And I hope to see many of you in the program coming up. If and when I'm teaching, okay? So thanks again, and thank you as well to the staff and faculty of University of San Diego School of Law, especially for allowing me to take a little extra time, okay? So I'm more than happy to stick around a little longer even to answer questions, but thanks again. Appreciate being here with you.
Thank you so much. That was amazing. Thank you so much for sharing all this experience knowledge with all of us. Before we end, I just wanted to go ahead and share my screen for a sec. You don't have to do anything. I'll just grab this. I just wanted to take the time real quick to tell everyone about our LLM programs. We have our 2 new online programs, LLM in US Law for International students where Professor Marin teaches, if you are interested in taking a class with him. We also have our LLM in taxation online program, which is launching new this fall. Both programs are also available on campus to students, but we just wanted to highlight these new programs that most folks might not be aware of yet. And there's also a QR code to the link for my calendar if you're interested in a one-on-one virtual meeting to discuss any interests. So just wanted to throw that out there. And we do have time if anyone would like to ask questions. I will allow you to unmute yourself in just a sec here, or you can type them in the chat. So if anyone has any follow-up questions before we leave here, let me make that available. Louis has a question.
Oh, thank you. Hi, Professor. Thank you. Thank you for your time. I guess my only question based on what you said, and I probably didn't hear, was these questions, these issues are designed to be answered in an allotted time, right? I mean, there's no way I can probably find out 3 or 4 IRECs within one of the essays and not be able to respond to them in the stipulated time, correct?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I will tell you, and this is for not just California, but other jurisdictions as well, too. You can glean such good insight and intel into the way the bar examiners will test. Because if you go back and you even look from administration to administration, you'll sometimes see that they actually go back and forth between topics. And usually the topics will mirror. They're not always going to be the same, but a lot of the big ticket areas, such as most of the contracts questions will always ask, was there a breach of contract? And so if you've already kind of thought about these, you're right. This is the hard part. And I do believe many students that I've worked with around the country, they know the law and they've thought about it, but they have not found the patterns. And so the more you can preempt, kind of like I said before, the faster it will be for you, where you're not kind of going, okay, I have to now, I have an hour, right? And there's multiple issues that I know they have me going through, but that's very overwhelming, isn't it? And the worst thing I could think about as well, too, that if I, let's say, sat down in your class, Luz, and you said, okay, write about this random legal concept for the first time, I don't know if it would come out the greatest the first time, right? And I think that's the same thing as well, too. The more you can really see patterns, as I mentioned, and start really practicing in this format. I've said this to students as well, too, right? If you can find all your I's and R's, right, in your IRAC, you're so much closer. You're almost halfway there, right, in your structure. And yeah, you always are going to have to fill in different A's and C's because there's always going to be different fact patterns, right? But you're going to see these patterns where you have different players, different stars in them, but they're still going to be on similar concepts. And so the structure ultimately looks very similar, if not exactly the same, for many of the responses as well, too.
Thank you, Professor.
You're welcome. Great question.
Thank you. We also have Liliana raised her hand.
Hi, hello. This was a lot of information. Thank you for for taking the time to instruct us. I mean, this is like a lot. I have 2 questions. From what I understood, we might have a 1 or 2 or maybe more issues, so that will take us to more than one IRAC, right? Or mini IRACs within one big IRAC. So for the sake of time saving, would it be better to just create one IRAC for each question and then just put inside, I mean, including there 1 and 2 issues and then the analysis and then one conclusion? I mean, just I'm kind of confused with that part.
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I think, and I wish we had more time to talk about this. But the hard part about your question is that, as I was alluding to, there are different ways to do it. The only thing, right, as I mentioned before, is that I've tended to see when students or applicants for the bar just put down a page or two of rules, right? Yeah, you're getting your rules down, but then are you really going back, right, multiple paragraphs? And I know we're not flipping paper pages, but I'll use that analogy, if you will. And are you applying the facts to every single one of those rules? That's where a lot of the time, if you just say, I'm going to put all the rules down and then analyze it all, you may actually think you're analyzing it, but you're not. Because here's one of the things you have to remember as well, too. And this is what's so hard about essay writing, both at the law school level and then also for purposes of the bar exam. You're processing all this in your head, right? And so you know these rules, you're putting them down, and you're going, I know these facts, right? I have to be applied to the rules. You may be doing it in your head, but you're going so fast, you may not be tying them together actually in the words, right? And that's the hard part, because the bar examiners are not going to give you the benefit of the doubt, right? They'll say, well, there's a bunch of rules, but I don't see any of the facts, or there's a bunch of facts that are way over here to the side. It doesn't really look like they knew where to apply them to. And so you're running kind of that risk as well too. But again, you may find, as I mentioned, with practice, if you start feeling more comfortable that way, as with anything, just make sure that you're fully applying all the facts that the bar examiners want to each one of the individual rules.
Thank you. I'm just gonna
Thank you.
slide in here real quick. We do have to wrap up soon here. We had one more question from Celeste. So I wanted to take one more question, and then we can wrap up and reach out individually with more questions.
Yeah, thank you for all the information that you provide us. This is very, very helpful, since I'm going to sit for the bar in July, so this year. And practicing is the key, right? It's, especially for spot decoys, decoy information that is not useful when writing the essays, because sometimes it gets you confused and not getting into the call that you need to focus. And thank you for all the tips for the IRA. I didn't know how to apply it and how to write it, because I had the idea of just IRAZ, but not all the different types of RAAs, different analysis and different rules that we could have. And thank you so much for all the tips and information.
You're welcome. And if I don't talk to you before, best of luck on the bar exam, and to any of the rest of you as well, too, who will be sitting for the bar soon.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We will go ahead and wrap up. Thank you to everyone who participated today. Thank you, Professor Marin, for taking the time. Again, I cannot stress enough how valuable this information is, and thank you for sharing it. I will send out the slides that he has shared with us and the recording of the session as soon as we have it uploaded. Have a wonderful rest of your day, everyone, and thank you again to Professor Marin.